Hello, friends. So, today I want to talk about something that runs deeper than most of us realize: the weight of unforgiveness. Yes, that's right. We're going to talk about things that are a little bit uncomfortable and about people that maybe we do not wish to talk about. But we have to do it because this unforgiveness, it is quietly affecting our emotional, mental, and physical well-being. So, how did I come up with this topic? So, last Sunday, I went to sermon, and girls, I wish I could have recorded it for you guys, but the sermon was in Spanish, and number two, it was not recorded, and I didn't know it was going to be so good. But yes, I decided that we need to bring this discussion to this channel. Because for many of us, we are living with chronic illnesses, and it is very likely that we are carrying pain that our nervous system still thinks is an active threat and still thinks that it needs to protect us from. But there is a hidden cost to holding on to this pain. Most of us can agree that holding on to this type of pain can just lead over time to emotional tension that will lead to physical symptoms such as tight muscles, fatigue, poor sleep, digestive issues, and even chronic illness. And this is not just anecdotal. Research shows that long-term resentment can increase stress hormones like cortisol. And I'm sure you've heard of cortisol, but if you have not, I'm going to try my best to explain it to you. Cortisol is going to be contributing to inflammation, and it worsens conditions such as fibromyalgia, autoimmune disorders, and heart diseases. So, of course, I'm going to nerd out for a second because my major is molecular and cellular biology, and I cannot not talk about this. But I'm going to try to do it with visuals and in a manner that hopefully you'll be able to understand. So I want you to imagine that your body, your temple, is like a castle. And in this castle, there's a huge watchtower, okay? And in this watchtower, there are guards that exist. And whenever these guards see danger coming, they pull an alarm bell. Where can you see, girls? Let's see. They pull on an alarm bell, and they say, help, it is not safe here. Who responds to this alarm bells? These tiny helpers. We can imagine that tiny helpers are going to be responding to this alarm bell, and are going to, try to put out the threat. So in this example right now, I just set the basis for it, but I want us to imagine that there is also a fire happening, okay? So a fire occurs in our castle. We know that the guards are going to pull the alarm bell, and we know that that is going to help all of the tiny helpers to turn on the water sprinklers to put out the small flame, okay? If this happens in our normal body, the alarm bell is turned off, then the water sprinklers are turned off, and everything goes back to normal, right? And it starts functioning just like normal. But what I want to point out here is that if you are living with chronic resentment, then it's almost like we pull down the alarm, and the alarm bell is always ringing. It never stops. And so what does that mean? That means that the tiny helpers and the guards are all rushing around, running around saying, it's chaos, we need more reinforcements, we need the water sprinklers to come down, we need an army of people. Like, it's so chaotic. Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows what is happening. When in reality, the threat no longer exists because it was put out a month ago, okay? So these soldiers are still going off. These tiny helpers are still running around seeking for more help. They're so exhausted, and they start bumping into each other, okay? They start bumping into the walls. They start breaking furniture. They're all getting confused. And this is literally happening inside of our bodies. When inflammatory molecules are working against each other, because there's so much chronic stress, they start bumping into the walls of our vessels, and oops, There, we have like heart and vascular like tissue being damaged. They're exhausted and they start confusing one another as invaders, so then they start attacking our own cells, and oops, there we have autoimmune diseases. Okay, this is a really silly example, but it's hopefully to explain the basis of immunology and to show you how important it is that we are able to regulate and shut down that alarm system when there is no longer an active threat. But inflammation, it's not bad. It's actually our innate system doing its job. But when inflammation does not turn off, then our body thinks that it's in danger when in reality, it's not. Science tells us that stress and pain, which comes in many forms, anger, resentment, gossip, are closely related to illness. Now, we can't always control our life stressors, but these are some things that you can control. Number one, resentment. We can replace this with a more positive form of forgiveness and compassion. Number two, anger. We can replace this with curiosity and inquiring, having curious mind about why this person might be feeling the way that they're feeling, why they may be reacting the way that they're reacting. Number three, gossiping. We can replace this with having uplifting conversations, talking about the future, the ways that we can plan. Number four, negative self-talk. We can replace this with having statements full of self-compassion and empathy. Number five, rumination. Rumination is going to get us nowhere. We're just going to be continuously worried and continuing to think and think and think, and that leads us nowhere. So a positive way that we can replace this with is having mindful redirection. Perfectionism. We can replace this with having a mindset of progress. Comparison. We can replace this with being thankful, making it a practice to write in a gratitude journal at least 3 things that you're thankful for every day. Jealousy and envy. We can replace this with generosity and celebration, and knowing that if we can celebrate in what the world has to bring to others, then the world will bring back that to us, or will bring more, or abundance in different forms to us. Overcommitting. We can replace this with the practice of saying no and being very clear with our limits and requests. Poor boundaries. We can replace this with having supportive friendships that understand when we say no, that don't get upset when we draw a boundary. Which leads us to my next point. We need to start replacing toxic relationships with people who criticize, manipulate, and drain our energy. Procrastination. It's the stress of having dooming deadlines on us, and we need to and sometimes it just gets worse with like digital overload and constant checking of news and emails, and it all causes us to break. There's so much going on in the world right now, so much chaos, and it seems that tomorrow there's going to be more, and then there's just no break coming. There's just so much digital overload, and I say this, I literally have made the decision to like get rid of like my YouTube, get rid of like my like TikTok, just because, and like stop consuming so much social media and like watching the news, just because it has made me so overwhelmed knowing that I wish there would be ways that I could help, and I've made it a decision that besides posting on YouTube, I'm not going to want to be stressing about many other things that I have no control of, unfortunately. This is my way of showing up. This is my way of giving back. So find a way to give back and, to be an activist in a form that doesn't require you, to be overwhelmed and drained without energy and so doomed about what's going on in the world that like forces us to like be bedridden. As someone with chronic illness, we already have so much going on in our lives that we don't need any much more stimulation. We also need to let go of unrealistic expectations of what our healing journey is going to look like by making flexible goals and having them be realistic and asking people to support us in these goals if it becomes too difficult for us to be able to fulfill them. Number 2, we can't control life stressors, but what can we control are things that we can actually do. And I've already said this before, but if you don't have a journal, you need a journal. You need to start writing down things. My favorite analogy is like, if you've ever seen Harry Potter, you know that Dumbledore has this like memory pot where he, at the end of the night, he goes and he, delivers his memories into this pot. And occasionally he'll retrieve them and he'll like go through them, but even Dumbledore can't contain all of these memories in his head because it is too stimulating for him. So what makes you think that you can contain all of this inside of your brain? We need an outlet. It needs to be written down. And if you really want to go back and visit these memories, you will have a place to visit them. Our brain starts eliminating memories at a certain point because it can only take so much. But the chronic stress that we're still feeling, those alarm bells are still going off, and they are not going to get better unless we find a way to regulate them. So if you are taking notes, these are some self-reflection prompts that I want you to write down. Number 1, who or what still lives rent-free in my mind? Now, I want you to pay attention to the moments where you start sleeping and you have dreams or nightmares about these people. Who or what shows up? Who is still stealing some of your energy and showing up in your life when you should have cut cords with them a long time ago? When somebody brings up their names, who are you getting triggered by? Who are you still giving some of that precious time and energy in your life? Who still lives rent-free in your mind? Even if you're not actively making the decision to think about them, if they're in your memory, if you can recall them, they're still living rent-free. If you can recall them and still feel those emotions, you have not healed yet from that past boyfriend, that past ex, that past husband. We need to learn to let it go, and we can only do so if we are honest with ourselves, acknowledge it, and start addressing the issue. Number 2, what would it feel like to lay that burden down? What would it feel like if we woke up this next morning and decided that we no longer wanted to live with this chronic illness? What would it live like to wake up the next morning and decided that we no longer wanted to live along through a 9 to 5 hour workplace? What if we decided next morning and decided that we no longer wanted to live off of SSDI, SSI? It is not enough. What if we woke up the next morning and decided that food stamps is not an option anymore? You have to make these decisions before somebody else makes these decisions for you. Because none of these methods of incomes that I have mentioned, none of them are stable. They come and they go and they're regulated, and they're not regulated by us. We have zero control over them. Number 3, am I still waiting for an apology or permission to move on? Sometimes I have found that we cannot rely on other people to give us an apology. One, because they may be dead. or two because, despite our best efforts, they don't have the capacity or the tools to be able to resolve conflict, and that's okay. But that means that unless we give ourselves this apology, then we can't move on. And that cannot happen because we deserve to be able to move on from this. Number 5, can I begin to forgive them, not for them, but for my own self, for my own peace? Sorry, guys, that was number 4. Now, number 5. What did I need from blank that blank couldn't give me? And is this blank something that I can give myself? Is this something, how can I do that? How can I give this blank to myself? For an example, what did I need from this past boyfriend that this past boyfriend couldn't give me? Maybe it was validation. Maybe it was love. Maybe it was gifts. Maybe it was time. Maybe I just wanted to be listened to. And my efforts to be seen. What do you need that somebody didn't give to you? So girls, we are almost to the end. These are the 3 truths that I want to give you. 3 personal truths. Number 1, forgiveness is not forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending it never happened. It means choosing to remember it differently without letting the memory keep hurting you every time it arises. It's saying, yes, this happened, and yes, it hurt, but I no longer want it to shape who I am or how I'm showing up. Number 2, forgiveness is not reconciliation. You can forgive and can still never speak to the person again. You can forgive and still set very strong boundaries. Reconciliation requires trust. It requires mutual accountability. And sometimes the other person is just not ready for it. And it requires safety. And if you do not feel safe, there cannot be a restoration of a friendship. Because the priority is that you're healing yourself, you're healing your nervous system. Number 3, forgiveness is a personal decision. There is no timeline, there is no pressure. Forgiveness doesn't mean saying that what happened was okay. It means saying you're no longer going to let it keep stealing your peace. In many traditions, there are 2 types of forgiveness, unilateral and transactional. And you don't have to memorize these terms, but understanding the difference may be liberating to you. Unilateral forgiveness is the kind of forgiveness that is just for you. You do it even if the other person never apologizes, even if they're no longer in your life, even if they're no longer alive. You do it not to restore the relationship, but to let your body exhale, to move forward without dragging that wound with you anymore. It says, I release you not because you earned it, but because I no longer want to be tied to what happened, and because I deserve greater. This is the kind of forgiveness many survivors of trauma or harassment may explore. It's not about approval, it's about peace. Then there's transactional forgiveness. This is the kind that involves people. It's the kind you use when you want to rebuild or continue a relationship, especially if there are people really close to you, especially if they're people that you're going to be seeing and living with them maybe for a long time in your life. And this requires real accountability. It requires a sincere apology. It requires a visible change in behavior and a space for you to voice how the harm affected you. It requires them to acknowledge what the harm was and what they stole away from you, and finding ways of them to be able to make up for that which was stolen to you before they're willing to apologize, so that you can then be able to believe in their apology. So next are some practical steps to begin forgiving. I would like you to write a letter, and you do not have to send this, but write this letter to a person that that you feel like has not yet given you an apology, and it's an apology that you would like to hear. And I am sure that as you start writing, a lot of things will come up for you. But I want you to close the apology with a unilateral apology, an apology just for you, and a promise to yourself that you will work towards moving, because this is for the betterment of you and the peace that your nervous system is asking for. You deserve a soft life, a peaceful body, and a future not haunted by the past. If this spoke to you, I hope you'll revisit whenever you need to remember that healing isn't always about doing more. Sometimes it just begins with letting go. If you want more of these heart-to-heart conversations, I'd love for you to subscribe or share this with someone who's on a similar path. Your healing matters more than you know.